We ended last time on verse 8, just barely made it there. Verse 7, where the beast makes war against the saints, and is all about world domination. So we kind of left with that, that stuff taking over. And that was the beast that came where? Where'd that beast come from? Out of the sea. All right. So that's the first beast that's described. We saw the dragon cast down, and then the beast arise up out of the sea, where we left off there. By the way, if anybody needs last week's, which is chapter 13, part 1, I've got it with the answers. All right. And then I don't know if we actually made the statement at the end of verse 8. But the idea that during this time we have one willing to die for the godly and the other willing to kill for the godly. And so we see this separation. It becomes black and white at this point. It becomes very clear. Some things that in the first part of the tribulation, you have Israel that made the big transition of believing or aligning with the one world leader, or this man that made peace, and so they're seeking peace. That you can't blame them for wanting to live at peace finally, and finally being offered an olive branch or a handout and everything. And so that's what they thought they were finally getting, and then when they realized it was not good, then it all fell apart. So you have a big transition there with them. You have all the other people that are getting saved, the ones that are being saved during this time, didn't believe prior to the rapture. Somewhere along the way they believed, and so things that once were confusing are made clear. And then you have things steadily getting worse, to where those who didn't believe, missed the rapture, don't believe during that time, and become more and more convicted or convinced that their side is the side they're sticking with. So as it gets here, it just becomes at this point where, and we'll see, especially with the end of this chapter, it becomes clear who's on what side and all that. So that's kind of where we left things last time. So we start with verse 9 tonight. Verse 9. Someone read that. One second. Sheila's got it. All right. Sheila looked at me. Y'all raised your hand, but she gave me the look. I'm going to read that.
I get that look.
Oh, you get that look. And it's probably not because she's going to read it. All right. All right. Sheila, verse 9.
He who has an ear, let him hear.
All right. Very short. All right. That's why you talk to Hal. You probably say that.
Yeah.
Would you listen to me? All right. He who has, something like that, yeah. He who has an ear, let him hear. Does that sound familiar at all? Okay, we started Revelation with that, especially chapter 2, verse 7. But there's a difference then. Do you remember, anybody quote that? What it said back in chapter 2, verse 7?
The churches,
Okay, what the Spirit says to the churches, exactly. And so then it said, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit, capital S, so the Holy Spirit, what the Spirit says to the churches. That was chapter 2. Remember, our chapter 2 and 3 are to the churches. Now it says, let whoever has an ear, let him hear. Period. So we're not talking to the church anymore. We're talking to who? The world. Anybody in the world. Hello, everybody out there. You better listen up. If at this point, and think about the point we're at, if at this point, after all that's taken place in 3.5 years, if someone is willing to listen, if someone is still seeking, if they're still not quite sure, God is still sending out these messages. Remember, we've already had plenty of, we see what the devil's already doing, and the Antichrist and the beast, and what's happening in the course of this being cast out of heaven and everything. And we've seen what God has been doing, and the woes, and all those kind of things that are happening. But even at this point, God is still reaching out. If you can hear, if you have an ear, you better listen, you better hear. So let's stop just a minute. Now, I'm going to move us, I'm thinking about this moment and that statement. If you have an ear, if anyone has an ear, let them hear. But let's kind of go back to where I believe we're just 3.5 years, let's say 3.5 to 4 years prior to this event, and in our day and time. Right now, what are some of the messages that the world needs to hear? They need to listen to this. What are some of those messages they need to hear right now? Can you think of anything? What's that?
They're a sinner.
Okay, they need to hear about sin. They need to understand their condition, that they're a sinner. Okay, what else do they need to listen to? What's that?
The end is near.
Okay, warning. There's something coming. All right, and it's real. It's not going to be good. So yeah, they need to be warned about what's coming, the wrath of God. Yes, Angela?
To pay attention to what they're listening to, beware of false teaching.
Good. So not only that there's a lot of stuff out there that's not what it seems, and it'll come to light eventually, but hopefully not too late for them. So, yes?
That forgiveness is there.
Absolutely great. They need to know that they can be forgiven. Not just that they're sinners, but they're sinners that can be forgiven. We have a merciful God, gracious God. How about the message that God is love? Nancy? All right, so they need to make a decision. They need to quit riding the fence. They need to quit following the world. They need to decide to follow God. It's that phrase, get right or get left. All right? Absolutely. They need to understand that, because there's the God of this world, the deception. There's all these false gods in the world. There's been many gods worshipped throughout history, but there has always been just one. There always has and is only one true God. They need to hear that. They need to have an ear to hear that. Anything else come to mind? Wanda?
We need to know that all of this stuff that's happening in the world today because people are so wicked.
Okay, they need some discernment, some wisdom to understand why is the world in the condition that it's in. Why are things gone and all that. They need to understand their scenario. Good. What else? Anything else?
Like Wanda was saying, just the fact there's a right and a wrong.
Good.
People don't accept that. And that's so blurred right now.
And that's a great one to lead into the deception that's going to be coming at the end of chapter 13. They need to understand that there is a deception out there, and this whole thing is upside down and inside out and right, and they don't have the moral compass, and they don't have the truth is truth and that kind of stuff. They don't have that. They need to listen to that and be open to listening to that. That's they need to know there's consequences. Yeah, I'd say consequences. This kind of reflects a little bit of consequences, doesn't it? All right? The consequences of sin, the consequences of rejection, the consequences of following the things of this world, the consequences of buying into the deception of Satan. So many messages, so many messages. But at the beginning, we heard in our time, those messages are coming to and through the church. And so we are the church that hopefully are giving those messages. But then we're going to be gone. And at this point, not only is the church gone, or we gone, but the nation of Israel that turns to God, we saw last time that she had to flee into the wilderness. And so at this point then, even Israel is not going to be that voice to proclaim God's truth anymore. We did have the two witnesses also that were speaking those messages, and as well as warning messages, but also repent and turn type messages and those kind of things. So they've had all that. Any of the Christians, the believers that get saved during this time, maybe somewhere along the line they had a voice, but their voice is gone here as well. They're not going to be able to proclaim those messages. And so you see how critical it is that when you can hear, when people can understand, that they need to do that. And for us, we know that the big turning point is not this point of chapter 13. Let him who has an ear listen before that trumpet call for the church. That's what's going to make the big decision. That's what's going to make the big difference. Here's one message. You can avoid all this. You can avoid all this, you know. And the world certainly likes to avoid consequences and all that kind of stuff. So if they could just hear that, that, you know, God has to punish sin, but He doesn't want to punish you in your sin. He already made a way. You can accept that and look what your future can be instead of what this is. So that's kind of goes into that verse 9 where everything just kind of stops and says, listen, listen, hear what I'm saying. And God's kind of giving that message. All right. Be saved before it's too late. Verse 10. Who's got that? Bethany, you raised your hand a minute ago. Amy, you want to do verse 10?
The people who are destined for prison will be arrested and taken away. Those who are destined for death will be killed. But do not be dismayed, for here is your opportunity to have endurance in faith.
All right. Let's hear that in a couple different translations. Someone else have a different, okay, Gia, and then Carla, yours sounds different than Gia's.
If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints.
Okay, Carla, was yours pretty close to that?
Very close to that.
Okay, anybody have any different kind of phrases in there? To kind of hear it over and over? Okay. All right, so basically what that it's a statement. This is a stand-up statement. We just heard in verse 9, of course, once again, I always remind myself, there was no verse 9. So the statement that was made to leading in this statement that we just read was, listen, hear what I'm telling you. Here's the way it's going to be. At this point, now we're not talking about messages trying to get people to get saved before that. We're talking about now at this point. How are things going to be different? How are things going to be changing? And it says, at this moment now, here's the way it's going to be. I say from here on out. Kind of here's what's going to happen in this last segment of this period. Not the way things are going to be eternally, but the way things are going to be here. It's a pivot. It's a change. It's something in the air. This is what's going to happen. Basically, what this sounds more like the Old Testament days of eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's when you look at Old Testament scripture and you look at how Israel was kind of operating and how they were obeying rules and stuff. That was kind of the general rule, man. If you killed someone, what happened to you? You got killed, all right? And it was even punishment for even action and that kind of stuff. Is it that way today? When you murder someone, you just automatically die? It's going to cost your life. Man, will you even serve any prison time? I mean, there's, you know, just don't hurt an animal. You know, then you get killed or something. Then you're in serious trouble. What's that? Orchard, you know, leave the trees alone, you know. Yeah, there's some mixed up things. Yes, Aaron.
The Amplified Bible puts a different twist on that.
Let's hear the Amplified.
Okay. It says, anyone is destined for captivity, and he will go into captivity. If anyone kills with a sword, he must be killed with a sword.
Right. And that's the eye for the eye. What this is saying is equal punishment will be paid out. It won't be, you know, if you do this, you're gonna suffer those consequences. Not in the way of justice. We're not talking about here that justice will, you know, fair trials and fair justice. No, it'll just go back to, hey, no questions asked. You kill someone, we kill you. We're just going to get this done, okay?
Well, the NIV seems to say it's already been predetermined. Anyone that is supposed to be killed will be killed with a sword.
More saying that if you're going to die, you're going to die. Yeah. And yeah, maybe it sounds more like that. But again, we put it in the context of what we're talking about here. And it is a little bit of that, not so much the predetermined, but it's already said that this is going to be reflective of that kind of existence. It's not a good thing, all right? I mean, that sounds good to us right now, like in the good old days, you kill someone, you be killed, you know? But we're living under grace, aren't we? So I'm not saying you should kill someone and be forgiven, but look at the Apostle Paul, you know? If his punishment was given to him, like that Old Testament punishment, he was killing Christians or having Christians killed. He should have been punished for that. And instead, he got to bring us the gospel and all that kind of stuff and encourage the Gentiles in the church and all that. And so that age of grace stuff that kind of overrides that basic, simple eye for eye, tooth for tooth type thing is kind of going to go away. And we're going to live in a more primitive time. I don't know if that's a fair way to say primitive time, but a basic rule of law or something, but it's even not that. It's just almost like you forego all that, and it'll just happen. Now, here's the thing about it, is that it's that in the New Testament we still have the same principle. All right, so Old Testament was a simple eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Galatians 6:7 says what? What you sow, you'll reap. What you sow, you'll reap. And so that's still, there's consequences for it, but it's not as simple as this for this, that for that, and that kind of stuff. It's more of a principle applied. But the ending part of that verse, verse 10, is what kind of brings us to the fact that this is not necessarily a good thing that takes place. So it's not saying that we ought to go back to the old ways because that was more just and reasonable. It was fair, equal, let the punishment fit the crime. That's not what this is really saying, because it says this statement that was just made, this condition, this way that things are going to start taking place, it calls for patience and faith or endurance, or patient endurance and faithfulness of the saints. So fill in the blank. This will require patience and faith of the saints. Now, who are the saints in that reference? Let's not say the church. No, yeah. At this point, what's that? Okay, and if they're martyrs, they're dead. So we're not going to say it's the martyrs.
God's people in here.
Okay, God's people. All right. All those are kind of correct, but remember,
It's those you were saying after.
right? Those that at this point, now we know a lot of martyrs have already died for their faith, and we're talking about this is an announcement of this is the way it's going to be kind of at this point on. And so many have already died for their faith, but it'd be those that are going to survive yet a while longer. All right. What about, would that include with the saints? Would you include Israel in with the saints?
If they're saved.
Okay, the Israel, 144,000, they've been marked, so they've been saved. Can we call them saints? Sure. All right. At this point, are things just all hunky-dory and great for the nation of Israel? No. Okay, so they need patience and endurance as well. They're marked, they're protected, but they've also had to flee their homes and flee their cities, and they've had to leave. So even those saints are enduring difficult times and are having to stay faithful, and they will stay faithful. But now we've got these saints that have not yet died. They've converted to Christ, and in this period of time, for a short time, and I'd say a short time because they're not going to last very long, but really from this point on, it's going to take endurance and faith and patience for this process, because it's not going to be pretty, it's not going to be pleasant. What's that? Well, let's not get there till we get to a couple verses down. All right. He's already trying to kill people down there. All right. Sherry, you have a question?
So is this saying, because of that last verse, here is the patience and the faith of the saints, is that really just telling the saints that somebody who's killed somebody will suffer punishment? Or is it saying
yes, there's no protection. It's
giving
just
them hope that they're, you know what I mean, like there's going to be payback for what these people are doing.
no. I don't see. I see what you're saying there. No, this is not saying, hey, don't worry about it, because if someone kills a Christian, they're going to be killed too. No. You kill a Christian in this day and time, it's like you're on the right team from the world's end. All right, and this is not God's judgment or time. He's saying just the condition of society, of man, is such that, man, you don't. There's no lenience. There's no nothing. People will be killing on suspicion. I mean, this whole idea of due process and all that goes out the window. I think that's really the flavor of what we're getting here. Tough times is what it's saying, not a just time. And so, because of that statement, this calls for this makes necessary the saints, the believers, and I'd say Christians as opposed to Israel. I still call them saints, but more so those that don't have that protection of God. They don't have the mark of the seal. It requires for them to be patient, because they're going to have to walk these steps until they are martyred, until they die, which will be soon. So the process is not going to be shortened. They're not going to get out of it. They miss that wonderful rapture where, they don't have to endure any of that. They just, in the twinkling of an eye, you go from having a great day or a headache or a good meal or whatever condition you're in, and we just step into glory, That's not the case. They're going to have to take some steps here and face what we're going to talk about before the 35 minutes is up here, with patience and endurance and faithfulness to the end. Not that they'll be saved, because they are saved, but because they are saved, they're saints, this is not going to be pleasant for them. By the way, it's not pleasant for the world either. So this rule of law, whatever, applies to everybody. I mean, there's just, you got leadership and you don't buck the leadership or something like that, or you get killed and all that kind of stuff. So not good times is what it's reported. Okay, verse 11 then. What's that? All right, you got a card?
Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon.
All right. Now, we could read on here because it'd be better to read the whole thing and then kind of back up, and I don't like doing that way because then we can get so many topics to cover, stuff like that. So let's just immediately see, after we've already dealt with beast number 1, okay, what was beast, where did beast number 1 come from? The sea. And what is beast number 1? The Antichrist. But not just the man Antichrist. What is the beast with all the heads and the horns and all that? So it represents government. So it is the end-time government. And it is, remember, we keep blurring these lines because you can use the words interchangeably even though there is some differences. So you can say it's the Antichrist. You can say it's the devil. You can say it's the one world government, all that kind of stuff. But when it describes the beast, it's really talking about the Antichrist, and the Antichrist, the devil incorporates or blends as he's cast out. He takes over the Antichrist, and so the devil, the dragon, becomes the beast, which is the government, and the leadership, and the man in charge, which is the man, the Antichrist. He takes him over. So it says when we talk about beast number 1, we're talking about all that in beast number 1. All right, and then all of a sudden now we have a different beast. The first one came out of the sea. Sea represents humanity, or out of man, and so the government comes out. All the nations, all out of the nations and the people come this one world government type thing. Beast number 1. Now we see beast number 2, because he said, "I saw another beast," and this one was coming out of what? Out of the earth. So the second beast comes out of the earth. All right. This second beast, when we tie the first beast to the Antichrist, because the Antichrist he rose to power and he led this one world government, and then as Satan gets thrown out of heaven, he embodies or he possesses the man, the Antichrist, and his leadership role, and he begins controlling that whole government and everything. Beast number 1. Beast number 2 comes out of the earth, and just as beast number 1 can be say is the Antichrist, beast number 2 is the false prophet. The false prophet. Okay? He's not called that right here. He's just called another beast. But look at these references I gave you. Someone read Revelation. We'll get ahead and we'll see when we get there. But Revelation 16:13, where it calls this beast what he is, or who he is. Who's got that? 16, okay, you got to read it.
Then I saw 3 evil spirits that looked like frogs. They came out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet.
All right. Look at my frogs! Yay, look at my frogs! All right, we're going to get there. We're not really there, but we're looking forward to my frogs here, all right? All right, so saw these 3 beasts, and it names those beasts, and we got the 3, and when it calls the last one, he calls it the false prophet. Someone else read 19:20? Is that okay? You got it? Rick?
Right, and the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who performed the signs in his presence, of which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. These 2 were thrown alive in the lake of fire which burns and brimstone.
All right, so we see these 2 men right here, and they're called beast. He's called beast and false prophet. And then in 20, verse 10. Who's got that? Okay, come on. 20. All right.
And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet have been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever.
Okay. Now we'll just as we've merged the idea of the devil, the dragon, with the beast and the Antichrist, the man, and then all of a sudden we see the man, the Antichrist, and the second beast, the false prophet. in the last verse we read, 19, being thrown in the sea, but now it says, then the devil, so it separates back out again, and ultimately it'll be the devil himself that'll be finally cast out. And you guys know what that means. This role that he continues to play when the devil is bound for 1,000 years and then released at the end. When he's bound for the 1,000 years, I'm trying to think of how I can say this disrespectfully, the lousy dude stands alone. I mean, he's no longer seen as a beast and a monster and all that kind of stuff. It's just the devil, all right? And that devil, without the Antichrist, without the government, without the leaders, the 10 heads, so whatever, just that old devil, the same sneaky snake that got into the garden. He stands alone, he's bound alone, and when he's released at the end, it's just him. We don't have Antichrist and world governments and all that kind of stuff. It's the devil acting as the devil did in the beginning when he rose against God and then brought others with him and all that. So we see this kind of fluctuation, and it's good for us to kind of wrestle around with that and kind of use them interchangeably, but also keep them separate. So remember those kind of terminology. So we definitely identify this beast, even though it doesn't say false prophet here. It clearly makes it clear in the future verses and chapters that that's the name, that's the person we're talking about. All right. The first one we said came out of the sea, that's humanity, but here it says this one comes out of the earth. Now, I didn't do as much background study as I wanted to on this one to make sure that there wasn't a lot of other explanations, but it is possible that when it says as the sea, because that's a pretty clear definition of the sea of humanity rather than the water, the sea that the first beast came out of, and the second beast comes out of the earth. It may just simply mean the land, because the word used there is a word for land. And when it's talking about the land, it's the land of Israel. All right? When God brought Israel out of Egypt, where did he bring them to? The promised land. And we just understand the promised land is Israel, is that holy place that God said, this is your land, this is your place. And so it's more of that. Now, Hal Lindsey, you know, that's one of the ones that I study a lot and everything. He believes that when this is talking about the beast came out of the second beast came out of the earth, using that word land and tying that land to Israel, the location of Israel, that it's an indication that false prophet will either be just flat out be a Jew, or will be have a Jewish background, or be part Jew. Does that make sense? And then I read some others that they begin to identify even some of those that are popes, that are potential popes for the future, that have Jewish background, that have converted to Catholicism from Judaism, so they have that background. And so, you know, coming up out of that possibility, and we had that question in reference to the false, to the Antichrist, asking the question, who, you know, is the Antichrist an American? Is the Antichrist Jewish? Is he not, or whatever? And so that same question or anything comes up to this point of the discussion about this man, just like the Antichrist was a man that came to power, rose to power there. This man that is in a position right here leads the one world religion. And so is he in fact a part Jew or prior Jew or whatever? I don't see clear, like absolutely this is what it is, but there's enough, and I've heard enough about that to say that's a possibility. Yes?
I had a question last week, and it was talking about the different sections. I'll never pull up, but one was England. Of course, that's not where the Pope stays, but the royal family and the Pope and Catholicism is just like one and one. And our popes are getting more and more liberal all the time.
Yes.
So I just wondered about the correlation between this.
Well, that's where a lot of the discussion of what this rising of this other beast comes, and the nature of this beast that brings in that kind of stuff. It's stuff, and we'll see that as we kind of work through this end of the chapter. It's stuff we're hearing and seeing today. This isn't like far-fetched, how could it ever come to that? We even know that the idea of a one-world government, is that really hard to imagine? No, that's not hard for us to imagine. Now, back in the day, I know when I started hearing this stuff back in the early 70s, and I was just third grade, you know, and I couldn't even fathom, I couldn't even understand the government of my city, you know, I couldn't understand how all of America could be under one government or whatever. We just didn't have the same global worldview. Nor could we imagine religion. How in the world could the whole world be consolidated into a religion? Well, it happens with, and this is where the blending comes, because your question was about the government, that there's 10 horns, and that those are the 10 areas, and how that was divided up. But that's just it. We're going to start blending together this idea of government and religion. So it's all going to run together. So yeah, all these ideas and concepts and the locations where they're coming from, it's going to be a lot of changes, but it's got to come from where it was to where it's going to be, where it is now compared to what it's going to be. But we can see it happening in our world today, and the groundwork being laid. Yes?
We're back into Daniel.
Yes.
And the Antichrist has got to come out of Syria, and he's a Jew, because he is a type or antitype of Christ.
Of Christ. If you take that as Antichrist, yeah, but I don't know. I still follow that, but I still don't know that he mimics everything. So does the false prophet and everything. So to be...
But the little horn,
yeah,
that was on the king out of Daniel,
right,
will come out of Syria.
Will come out of Syria. Okay, so we see all this running together. Now we know it also changes, because we have to separate them out when we're talking about whether this person and that person's part Jew and stuff like that. Remember the big distinction that happens when we have the 144,000 sealed, because then we have the Jews we would equate with believers. Well, this Antichrist is not coming out of the believing Jew group, nor we don't have any reason to believe that all Jews become believers. And so there'll be plenty that, just like Jews didn't accept Christ, Jews don't all accept Christ at the end, and some will follow the Antichrist, even though the nation as a whole will turn. If you're a Jew and you buy into the Antichrist and you're not one of 144,000, listen, you're not going to flee Israel. You've got connections. You've pledged your allegiance to the Antichrist and stuff like that. So it's not everybody, but it's as a whole. Okay, let's move on. All right, so just take it as land and the possible Jew. The beast, the description of this beast in verse 11, it says the beast was like a lamb that had what? 2 horns. All right. Do lambs have horns? No. Lambs don't have horns, though. And so there's something wrong with this picture. It's like a lamb. Revelation, a lamb. A picture of a lamb. Where have we seen a lamb before? We see Jesus as a, we see one as though he was a lamb that had been slain. Well, that's references to Jesus. So here we have this religious leader who is a beast, by the way. He's not talking about just him individually, but he is the beast, the religious beast, the leader of that, coming up out of here. And at first glance, it's like, oh, here's another sweet little lamb. Horns, so really we're talking about a wolf in sheep's clothing is really what we're looking at here. This first beast, it's interesting because the first beast, it said the Antichrist, and the first beast that rose from the sea got his power from the dragon. Who is the dragon? The devil. So the first beast, the Antichrist world government that comes out of the sea of people, gets his power from the dragon, but it says the second beast speaks like a dragon. Speaks like a dragon. All right? So in other words, his message is that goes along with the devils of the dragons, but now he's a sheep. And so it's going to be this soft tone, monotone, deceptive, lulling, says one thing, means a different thing, doesn't mind lying or deceiving or whatever, even under religion. Listen to this and see if this doesn't sound like headlines out of today's news. This is a description of what the message will be from this lamb with two horns. He'll talk all about loving. It's all about love and accepting and diversity and gender equality. He will be condemning, but he'll be condemning of such things as racism, that's terrible, and sexism, that's horrible, and poverty, that's terrible, and all discrimination. We should not discriminate. When all the while, underneath, he is a slithering monster that's making these claims. Now, what's the message that we're hearing in our world today that is spreading all over the globe? It's not just an American society thing. Yeah, it's all, and it's such confusing words because we get words like those from the Lord. Love and unconditional love, and we're all, we get messages from the Bible that there's no Jew or Gentile, we're all God's children and all that kind of stuff. And so taking the same messages and good sounding words and catchwords of the day, he'll pick up on all this groundwork that's being laid, and in a very pleasant, soothing, I don't know if it'll actually be this way, but it almost appears though he will bring people under these kind of headings only to then turn around and deceive and to use that against them. By the way, in all that discussion and the difference there is in all this discussion of this today, we're supposed to do all that acceptance and intolerance and equality applies to everything except for Christianity. And then all of a sudden it stops. It's like, oh, and don't be bringing your Bibles to school, and don't be praying at these events, and don't force your religion on me, and don't dare refuse to bake a cake for us, and don't do business with us or something like that, because then you're the bad guy, and it's all turned around, flip side, and everything like that. Well, I'll bring all that under the idea of a religious leader that has been given authority and power by Satan himself to kick those messages up a notch and really drive them home. That's what we're looking at. That's the environment and the makeup for a rough times. And at this point, forget Christians and Jay Sekulow is not going to come to our defense. He'll be part of the rapture. And so we're just not going to have any defense against that. The world at this point is going to buy into that lock, stock, and barrel. Okay? Verse 12. What's 12? Okay, the answers were, possible Jew, the beast was like a lamb with two horns. Those are the only blanks I have, wasn't it?
What's A? Israel, after Israel A?
Oh, it's a Jew. Hal Lindsey believes that the beast, or this false prophet, will be a Jew. That was that discussion there, so he'll be a Jew. But anyway, he describes him as a lamb with two horns. Okay, who's got verse 12? All right. Angela, you were second hand.
And he exerciseth all power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Okay, now remember that deadly wound. We talked about that last time, and deadly wound or healing, or it appeared as though he had been fatally wounded and now is alive, and that head that was wounded, or the leader, was the Antichrist. But really, at that point, just substitute him for Satan. I mean, the devil. Satan was dead, but then he's alive again, mimicking Christ's death and resurrection. Now we have the lamb that was slain and brought back to life, and those kind of terminology as well. But as it describes this beast, now we're looking right here at this we've got a monster, ugly looking thing with heads and horns and teeth and big old bear paws and all that kind of stuff. We describe this beast at. And then we look at this lamb, and this religious aspect is so gentle looking and everything, and yet look what it says. He has been given, he'll have as much authority as the first beast. How did the first beast get his power and authority?
from the devil himself. And this one is not just a sidekick. I mean, he has just as much power and authority given to him by the dragon, or by Satan himself, by the first beast. But here's the deal. This guy right here, we see the Antichrist rise to power. He's got the bow with no arrow. And so he comes in the name of peace, but then he's going to dominate the world and everything. And then certainly when the Antichrist, the beast, and the one world government, all that stuff is embodied, Satan is cast down and he fully embodies that and everything. We see that. But here, when the Lamb does it, when he takes this power and authority that he has, he will not use it to exalt himself. Who is he exalting? It says he exalts the first beast. He has as much authority as the first beast, but what he does is cause the world to bow down and worship him, himself, but the first beast. So it's all allegiance to Satan. It's all allegiance to the government. Since the Antichrist and the devil we're merging them together, it's total allegiance to the world government and its leadership, which would be the Antichrist, which is possessed by the devil. Nancy.
So you're saying that we are being fed a bunch of lies under the auspices of religion?
Yes, there's a lot of deception in religion today. And the thing about it is the motive and what the reasoning for that. If it was really, if the messages given to us today were really true tolerance and true equality and those kind of things, then we would get it too as Christians. But it's not. Because it doesn't apply to us, then it tells what their real motive is, and that is to promote their own causes and their own self. Our society is. All right, it doesn't fool us, does it? We're not fooled. All right, but we'll be gone at that point. And so that kind of thing is not going to change us or convict us. We'll be gone, and the remainder are no match for the rest of the world. Because right now we're a minority, but we're a big number. Then it's just a few. I mean, really, compared to a minority. So, yes and no. It's the deception, but it's on purpose. It's not an accident that those messages are clouded and deceived.
You know, the irony of this is all you hear now is separation of church and state.
Yes.
And so these people now that are screaming this are the same kind of people will be.
Now let's merge it together. That's an interesting flip to the thing right there. Yeah, separation of church and state, and then this guy's going to go and say we'll be one and the same. That's exactly what's happening in this environment that happens. So his efforts, he doesn't exalt himself. He causes everybody to really change their beliefs now. See, all these things that you should be allowed to think and feel however you want to in your religions and all that stuff. We should tolerate Hindus and Muslims and Buddhists and Christian Scientists and whatever, go on and on and on. We should tolerate all these different viewpoints, and only Christianity comes up and says they have the only answer, and they're the only ones going to heaven and all that kind of stuff. That's terrible, horrible, all right? But it'll all change that to then he'll change all that and say, now look, there's one way to believe. There's one focus of our worship. There's one way to believe and one religious thing to bow down to, and it's that first beast. It's the Antichrist. All right? And so what he does is his efforts will go to merge, and here's your fill in the blank, will go to merge religion and politics. To merge those two. I mean, I'm all about saying, man, Christians ought to get involved even in politics. We've got a vote coming up next Monday, and we ought to vote no against that stupid marijuana thing. We ought to vote yes for abolishing abortion. Those are my beliefs right now. We ought to get involved. But I'm not saying merge religion and politics. We just, as Christians, need to be the salt and light and make those decisions. Not this way. This is forced religious worship of the government and its leader, which is the Antichrist, which is the devil. That's the way it's going to become. He will promote the beast through the image of the beast by force. And that's the secret. By force into the world accepting a single world religion and a single world government. All the making is already there. We only have one major government, but members made up of 10 areas and leadership. That's going to be continue to make sure that it's all under the thumb. It's all, there's no choice in the matter of that. So it's all forced, and there's a great deception going on. Jesus warned against this great deceiver. When he's talking about this, coupling with the Antichrist and the government and all that, Jesus warned against that in Matthew 24:24. Who'd like to read that? Matthew 24:24. Running out of time. I'll go faster. Who's got it? Oh, no. I'm sinking. Catherine, you got it? All right, 24:24.
The false Christ and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect.
Right. So Jesus talked about these days and times, and we've talked about other false prophets or false deceivers and Antichrist and all that stuff. But this is the culmination of it. This is it, full force and everything to deceive. Okay, 13. We're going to get through 18. We got to verse 13. You got it. Oh, no, don't do that. All right. 13:13.
And he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men.
All right. Show off. All right. There's a lot of fireworks. All right. Here we go. So he does these signs, and these signs are counterfeit miracles. Counterfeit, that's your fill in the blank. It's counterfeit miracles. That's just like Pharaoh's magicians. What did they counterfeit miracles? Drop the staff and it becomes a snake. Okay, we can do that. So did they actually make staffs turn into snakes? No. But they gave the illusion of that. The magicians, they convinced people that they could do exactly what God did. This is all about counterfeiting. So he's counterfeiting Christ, counterfeiting the Lamb, the religion, all that kind of stuff. And he's able to even do some things that look like it's God. And that's what he's trying to do. In the book of Job, Satan casts fire down on Job's sheep and destroyed them all by casting fire down. And so this ability, this power or whatever, when people saw that, they thought that had to be God. God must have done that. Well, it wasn't. It was Satan. Remember also a little bit as far as counterfeiting, what's happening. Just like Moses would do something and Pharaoh's magicians would do something. We just had the two witnesses, and they were doing things like casting down. Fire was burning up people that were coming against them. And so here's this beast that is able to do some of these counterfeit miracles as well. So it's a deception as well. Paul warns about these in 2 Thessalonians 2:9-10. Let's not take time to read it. Did I give you that reference? Okay, so that's a reference where Paul warns about these counterfeit type things. Be leery of that, all right? Be careful about that. Verse 14. Who's got 14? Marilyn? Got it? No. She looked at it.
And with all the miracles he was allowed to perform on behalf of the first beast, he deceived all the people who belong to this world. He ordered the people of the world to make a great statue of the first beast, who was laid in with them.
Put a big old star by this one. I think I did it bold and everything. One of the things that people here understand that happens during Revelation is happening at this point. We have the image of the beast. The image of the beast. Now, we don't need to even spend too much time here because you can't prove what it is or whatever, or prove what it's not or anything. But we can just imagine a statue, an image, all right, of the beast. And so remember, this is the false prophet putting all his attention to the first beast, which not just the government, but the Antichrist, the devil, putting all his eggs in that basket, bow down and worship him. Go back to the Ten Commandments. I mean, how many of the commandments can you break with that? You shall have no other gods before me. You shall make no graven images. You shall bow down to no one. And all that stuff that God gave all these thousands of years ago. Satan knows all that. And here he is right here breaking all the religious leader breaking all those rules. Part of this is that the religion of today, even within, I won't say within Christianity, but even within those that would claim Scripture as an authority are moving away. There's a move away from the authority of Scripture. And if you take the authority of Scripture away, then you're not living up to God's law and God's rule. And so even your leader can break all those commands and it doesn't matter. You know, just don't use scripture against him. All right. So what he's doing, he forms this image. Whether it's a tangible physical statue, I envision a hologram kind of an image, but I don't know. I'm trying to get high tech on that. But there's some kind of way that he has this image that all can see and all can bow down to. And that's the image that they have. Now, let's go back to John's day, 2,000 years from our time past, all right? When he describes this image that's going to be bowed down to, boy, people said, well, I could envision that even back then, because they had these Greco-Roman gods that they would make all these things. Think about Mars Hill and what Paul saw when he went to Mars Hill. Think about all the Roman emperors that had images made of them that bow down and worship him. And we go back to Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon and all that kind of stuff. So this idea of images, that's why God said, don't make images. Don't even make images of me. You won't bow down to an image. You bow down to me and me alone. Don't make images of other gods or of me. And so that's exactly what he does. He makes this image of this beast. And then, if we tie that into Matthew, there's your reference, Matthew chapter 24. We just read in 24, but verses 15 and 16. Matthew 24, verse 15 and 16 is that description of this very thing when he says this image is set up in the temple, which doesn't exist today. And so in the Holy of Holies, in the new built temple of the day, where the image is set up in the Holy of Holies and says, worship him. And so that is the abomination that causes desolation. That is the big. That's the turning point. I mean, that's one thing to be cast out of heaven and to take this over. But now he is taking remember, Israel has fled by now. And so the temple that will be built there is the devil basically moves in there. Verse 15. Okay, one.
He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that it could speak and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed.
Right. So we have this weird thing talking about. So, whatever this image of the beast is, it's a hologram, it's a computer image, it's whatever, he gives it the ability to actually breathe and speak, which is a counterfeit once again. We think of God breathing the breath of life into Adam, and he became a living creature. And so here we have this image of a beast, but then this image, he breathes life into it, or supposedly breathes life into it, and it is alive and is able to speak. Now the image of the beast is now speaking to everyone. You see what this, it's like mind control, it's all this kind of weird stuff going on, and all this with the ability that this religious leader, the leader of this beast, this false prophet, is making happen. And he makes it possible then, it comes alive and it speaks, and however he does it, it is totally convincing. I mean, it is a convincing performance that takes place, so much so that now he causes everyone to bow down and to worship this, and this beast calls for worship of himself. And if you're a non-worshiper, what will happen? You'll be killed. So you bow down, not by choice, you bow down. Or the only choice you have is if you refuse to, you will be killed. You'll be handed over. Matthew 24:9 says the same thing, that they will be handed over, which implies not only the beast doing this and the image of the beast calling for worship, but if you're being handed over, it's your aunt, your uncle, your relative, your neighbor, the authorities. I mean, no one is going to allow you to not do that without you being turned over. Did you have a question, Aaron?
Yes, if it's counterfeit, if everything you're doing is counterfeit, why didn't John say that?
What do you mean? I'm not sure.
Why did John speak it as if it really appeared to be that way, but didn't say they appeared to be that way? It says they did what they did.
Right. Well, yeah, this is not a delusion. Something is happening. This is some kind of an image that he makes that he then is allowed to bring to life, more or less.
He doesn't. John
John's not interpreting this. Remember, he's just describing what he sees. So he's not trying to explain to us. He sees and he writes what he's told and what he hears and what the angels tell and what the Lord tells and that kind of stuff. But he's not saying, okay, let me teach you now what this means, like the Apostle Paul would do, or like Jesus did when he would teach a parable or something. That's not what's going on here. So he simply says, this is what I saw. The beast made this image, and he made everybody bow down to this image, and he gave it life, and it spoke, and that kind of stuff. So that, I think that maybe is why. He's not trying to explain this stuff. He's just describing it. Peter talks about this time in 2 Timothy 3:1, and he calls them terrible times. So this is just horrible stuff that's happening in this time. 3 more verses. Verse 16 is the other big one. We have the big verse 14 and verse 16. Someone read that. Awful verse.
He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead.
Okay, so once again we get that part that people have heard that just know a little bit about Revelation, the mark of the beast. The image of the beast, the mark of the beast. These are the biggies, and they're in this portion of Scripture. Let's just move on to 7. Because what is this mark of the beast? We don't know exactly. Is it a tattoo? Is it a microchip? Is it whatever? We just know the hand and the forehead. It's like they give a choice. Where do you want it? Either way. You can take this all the way back to the idea, though, that the Jews, well, what do? They wear these little boxes either on their wrist or on their forehead. Why? They have the Word of God right there as reminders and everything. It's once again kind of mimicking that. This is where it is. And so you can guess whatever, but no reason to at this point. It's just whatever it is, it's given. It's an outward sign that you belong to the devil, that you've bought in, that you are loyal to that. All right, verse 17 basically says that no one will be able to buy or sell, can't buy food, all the commerce, all that is all now going to be controlled to this because they have to have the number which is his name. What this really is talking about is a cashless society. Why cashless? Because you can trace then numbers or whatever. It's all by computers. The ability to control all across the board. No more putting it in your pocket or hiding it or going off the grid. And so, you have to buy in or you're left out. And then, and we contrast this, by the way, this number of his name that is put on the hand or the forehead. We contrast this with chapter 7 that we already read, God's mark or his seal on the 144,000. So here it again, using the same thing. It's a mimicking, a counterfeit or whatever. Also, next week, we begin the chapter by seeing Christ, and we see God, and we see the 144,000 and all that kind of stuff, and we see Christ with his name, in the name of the Father. And so all this is, again, mimicking. And we end with the last verse, verse 18. This calls for wisdom. What is the number of the beast? 666. Number 7 means what? Perfection. Satan falls short of perfection. Man, he was created beautiful. He's a beautiful archangel and all that kind of stuff. But he is not beautiful, and he falls short. And so 666 is that. My email at home is Reverend Mike Peter 777, and it's not because of a gambling thing. It's because of completion, But this is 666. It's the number. There's all kinds of stuff we can talk about that. But we know that part. We'll pick up there. We'll kind of talk about that mark of the beast as we go into chapter 14. Donnie?
The Jews that were sealed, 144,000.
Yes.
They had to walk on them.
Yes, they had a mark on the forehead. I don't believe it was wrist before, it's just forehead.
It wasn't the 766.
No. It's the mark of God. Right, it's the mark of God so that they could not be marked. So, but it was a mark. And it was in the same place. So, yeah, definitely not the 666. All right, let's pray and be dismissed. Father God, thank you so much that we can know and understand and use wisdom and discern this, God. The world does not use this wisdom. They don't discern this. So right now the church has this truth, and we try to tell the church. And Lord, we pray that those that have ears will hear, so that they will never fall victim to these lies, deceptions, and the things that are to come. We love you and we praise you in Jesus' name.